All right, let's move on to our next lighting scenario, and let's talk about, make sure I'm on task here, reflectors. What can we do if you just have reflectors? Can you produce a beauty look with just reflectors and no other lighting modifiers? Well, I haven't practiced this, I hate to tell you, so I'm going to learn with you. But my answer is yes, we can accomplish this. It's one of the fun parts of these Creative Live classes is you guys get to see me work in real time, and you get to see my mistakes and my successes. So for this, I want kind of a large light. I can use these smaller reflectors, and they will actually work pretty well, but I'm going to pull in a nice big honkin' reflector, and that's a technical term, honkin'. This is made by a company called Lastolite, and it's actually a collapsible backdrop. But the cool thing about this is it's somewhat translucent, so you can shoot flash through it, you can reflect flash off of it. On a bright and sunny day, you can put it over the model to prevent the light from shining on her. And it's almost 6 feet tall. It's about 5'11" tall, 5'10", something like that. It's a great size product. And I know I keep talking about saving money, but oh my goodness, I love this tool. It was less than $100, but it's worth every penny. How am I going to hold this thing up here? Well, I'm going to use that little clampy thing that I showed earlier. And I'm losing sight of all of my... Where did that light stand go? Did I hide it back there? Oh, it is. Okay, cool. I'm warning you, don't buy too much flash gear, otherwise you can't find any of your flash gear. I know, you're like, oh, Mike, woe is me. Okay. So to do this setup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as my secondary reflector. So this is going to reflect light back onto the subject. And then my key light, or my primary light, I'm going to shine into my silver reflector, because I know I'm going to need as much power and oomph as I can possibly get. This light stand is only 6 feet tall, so that's something else we haven't actually talked about today, is how tall should your light stands be? Well, you can see that it would be nice to have a taller light stand, but for this we'll just work with it. Typically I recommend 8-foot light stands at a minimum, 8 or 9 feet. It gives you a lot of flexibility in the real world. And now I'm going to swap this one out. So we're going to go to silver rather than white. When you're working with models, sometimes it's nice to have all this stuff set up ahead of time so that you're not everybody's waiting around, especially when you're working with kids and younger folks. Kids are very impatient, but Natalie is very patient. Thank you. Okay, now I have to figure out a way to get that flash to go into this reflector. So this will be the key light, and I got to think about how that's going to be positioned. And in general, remember that light feathering and that centering the light kind of there in the middle. Set it up about there. Cool. That should work. This is going to be a reflector on this side. So now I got to figure out a way to put the flash basically right over there. This is probably the least expensive way that you can actually do a beauty light scenario. Very inexpensive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this flash out, and actually I'm going to mount it here on this little brass stud. Just straight mount. And to do that, whenever you buy these flashes, they come with little plastic feet. I don't know if you guys have seen those before. Pull that out here. So there's a little foot, and the flash goes in there. And on the bottom of that foot is a little 1/4x20 stud, and that just goes right onto this. Sorry, 1/4x20 threaded nut, and it goes right here on the stud. Excellent. Now, the next thing I'm thinking about is spread. I got to make sure that this flash spreads to the size of that reflector. So a couple ways to do that. One is to put the diffusion dome, but what that does is it sends light straight up, straight down, and off to the sides. I don't necessarily want that to happen, so I'm going to do a little bit less spread than that, and I'm just going to pull out this little diffusion panel here, and that gives me probably enough spread to cover the whole size of that reflector. We'll heighten that up. We'll bring it here to the front. Super. And it's basically going to shine there onto the reflector. Another thing that I do is I actually push the flash button. I'll pull this out so y'all can see what I'm doing. If I push this flash button, it'll trigger the flash, and I can actually see the throw of light and make sure that it is indeed covering the whole surface area of that reflector. So I do that when I position it. Okay. Yeah, sometimes what I'll do is also look at the ceiling to see if there's any spill or overflow onto the ceiling. Okay, that's cool. I'm liking that. And I think we're ready to take a picture. Again, close counts. So I'm going to get these in nice and close to reflect as much light as possible. I have no idea what the exposure is going to be, so let's see what we've got. Here's the test. Nice. So I'm at a 200th of a second, or actually I was at a 250th, but that shouldn't matter. Has it come in yet? I wasn't paying attention. Oh, you know what? It's not tethered. So I have to reconnect here, I think. So what I'm going to do, this is typical in the studio, is that the tether stops. So I'll just shut down the tethering, and I go back to File, Tethered Capture to start it up again. And I hit OK. And then it takes a second. There we are. Now we're connected. Take two. Great. Lovely. Oh yeah. So what a different look, huh? So now we're getting some pretty harsh shadows. And that shadow is pretty harsh because we are shooting into a silver reflector pretty close to her. You can see it's slightly off axis, right? Because you can see the shadow coming off of her left side. But that's a shinier, brighter, more intense look. And this is a good learning opportunity for us all. This is what maybe a silvered umbrella would look like. Or a silvered, let's say a softbox without a diffusion panel in front of it. A much more intense feel to it. So how do we get rid of that shadow on the side? Well, I got to get the light more centered, more in front of her. So to do that, I'd have to bring it over here, raise it up a tiny bit. You hear me talking about on axis. Does that term make sense for you all? On axis means in line with her face, so like the shadow would fall behind her. Okay, let's try that. Super. And again, 1, 2, 3. Now I have a feeling I'm going to want to bring in another reflector on the other side. All right. So we're still getting a little bit of the shadow because it's not perfectly on axis. And overall, it feels a little bit bright. Would you all agree? A little bit too hot. So again, I don't want to go and adjust my flash, so I'm just going to bring my ISO down. I was at, well, you can see there, I'm at ISO 320. I'm going to bring it down 2/3 of a stop to ISO 200 and shoot again. Nice. Great. And the look, that should look pretty good. All right, maybe 1/3 of a stop down would have been better, but you get the feel, you get the idea. How do we deal with that shadow? Well, there's a couple of ways. I could, again, try to work harder to get it more on axis, or I can pull her away a little bit more from the background. And by doing that, it will actually cause the shadow to fall farther behind her. So I think I might try that just a little bit. Move everything forward a little bit. And then I'm going to have you stand up and come forward a tiny bit. Good. Not too far, because then we lose that white backdrop. A couple inches, maybe 6 inches. Hopefully that solved it. And then going a little bit higher, now that we're forward, and bring this up a little bit. Okay. And I think the brightness will be okay because we kind of moved everything equivalent. What's going through my head is, did we change the distance from the flash to her? That's the most important distance. And 1, 2, 3, great. And I bet that shadow is going to fall down a little bit farther behind her, and it has. It's not perfect, but you get the idea. So you can get this look with reflectors, and reflectors only. Should we see what it looks like with just the white reflector? I'm kind of curious about that. Let's do that. Because I know there's some questions earlier on about the difference in the looks, comparing this versus that. You know, a soft box versus a beauty dish. Let's just look at the difference between silver versus white. And I think what we'll find is that the white is a much softer look overall, less specular. Okay, great. And I know for sure here what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to change the exposure because we're reflecting a lot less light overall. But let's just do a test. Everything's the same. Great. I have a feeling we're going to have to bring that back up to ISO 320. Oh, not bad. What's amazing to me is how much light is coming off of her shoulder and her neck on our left side, her right side. We're getting all of that reflection just from this. And so ideally, I'm going to pull in another one for the other side to get both sides so they look about the same. But the exposure on that's pretty good. And just to finish this off, I'm going to pull in one other reflector. And for this, I'm going to use a human-powered light stand because I can't actually shoot with my right hand and hold it with my right hand. So would one of you be willing to hold this for me? You want to do it? Cool. I know I promised that you could do all this on your own, but hey, sometimes a human helps. All right, about right there. Come right there. Perfect. Actually go back a little bit. Yep, right on. In this case, I would normally have another light stand with another little clampy on top to hold it in place. Cool. I think that should do it. Thank you. Yeah, look at that. Look at how that filled in the shadows on both sides. I'll compare this one with the previous one. And the one on the left is the most recent one. The one on the right was the one without the other reflector in place. So really nice look to that. And you've done that, just to recap what we've done, a $30 reflector here, a $30 reflector here, and maybe a $70 or $80 reflector there. And you could probably get it done with just 3 of these. So for around $100, you've got yourself a scenario where you can get pretty nice looking beauty light overall. Right on. Okay, any questions about using the reflectors as your primary light sources? Yeah.
Thanks. The big white reflector has any special name to find it?
This one here,
yeah.
The large one? Yeah, it's called, I think they call it a collapsible backdrop. And it's made by a company called Lastolite. And it's I think this one's like, look for like a 4 foot by 6 foot, something like that, or maybe a 4 by 7, somewhere in that range. Another company that I've purchased these from is called Botero. That's back there, Botero. They make a bunch of them as well. But just look for a collapsible backdrop, and that should do it, because it's technically a backdrop because of how large it is, but I like using it instead for the reflectors. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to pull the softbox out again, and we're going to make basically a light tint that's going to go all around the model. So we're going to do a softbox up high, and I'll probably turn it sideways just to give you a different feel for that, and then reflectors all around. So this is basically the ultimate in beauty lighting, no shadows. All right, it's going to take me a second to get that set up. So I'll move kind of quick here. We are going to end up using reflectors on the sides and on the bottom. So I'm going to keep this one ready to go. And I think for this one, I'll use this one down low like that. Good. And I need, we'll leave this one up too. Yeah. I love making decisions on the fly. I don't have sandbags in, so I got to be careful that these things don't fall over. I should be using sandbags, but I'm moving fast. At the same time, I'm going to take my camera down so I can move even quicker. So we'll use the softbox here. And that's, again, our key light. Key light meaning the main light, the light that causes the effect. That's what the term key light means. Well, I need the little post. One of the joys of watching this type of class live is you get to see how much time all of this takes, and you get to judge for yourself if you really want to tackle it. And for this one, just to mix things up, I'm going to rotate it horizontally. When you buy a speed ring, make sure your speed ring gives you that flexibility. It's an important skill of your lighting equipment. Why horizontal? I don't know. Just want to mix it up a bit. Okay. Pull that one up here, like that. Excellent. Something's moving on me. Oh, there we go. Got to tighten that one down.
So while you're adjusting that, Mike,
Yeah.
we got a question from Garrett about the small point of light in a softbox. Does that ever cause a hot spot? Or with these like ProPhoto softboxes, they're pretty good at diffusing that light, right?
Yeah, one of the things I haven't talked about is Garrett.
Yep.
Yeah, Garrett, is that all of these tools, these softboxes, the Octas, they come with an intermediate diffuser inside. So you can choose to use that. And what that does is the light from the flash hits that intermediate diffuser and then spreads out even further to the large diffuser. In today's case, I'm not using that. And the reason why is because I've got all of my flashes set for that really wide angle. I've got that internal diffusion panel out, and that causes it to go edge to edge. So they can cause a hot spot, but in this case, I think you can see it's not that significant. It all comes down to fine tuning at that point, Garrett. And I'm happy with the look I'm getting so far.
Cool.
Okay, so now we're going to pull in this guy down below. Gravity moves things all around. All right. Yeah, and so there's this other type of light stand called a C-stand, and the C-stands, they're very expensive and they're very heavy, but you can stack the feet over the top of each other. When you use a standard light stand like this, a lot of times you're just fighting the feet all the time. So, fighting the legs. Okay. And we'll do that. Bring this up. There we go. Thank you. Like I said, you're always looking out for me, man. I love you, man. Okay, good. Now we need to bring in one more on that side, and to do that, normally I would use a light stand and another little bracket, but I don't have it today, so I'm gonna pull in someone from the audience to help me out. You wanna do it this time? Okay. And your job is basically just to hold it about right there. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this. Key light here. We've got that, and that's going to cause a nice little catch light in the eyes. And then we've got a little light studio all around her face and all around her torso. Fantastic. So we're going to light from below, light from the sides, and all of the reflectors right now are white. So we're not using any silver reflectors. Everything is just white. All right. Time for a picture. Cool. And I haven't made any adjustments to the flash power. Oh my goodness. Oh, that makes me happy. I whispered. Oh, that makes me happy. That's a beautiful shot. Love it. Make sure I'm selecting the right one there. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, look at that. Really fantastic look. I want to take another just because I think I should take another, but I don't think I need to take another. We'll call that good. Thank you. Recapping the settings, I'm at ISO, where am I at? ISO 200, I'm at f5.6, I'm at a 250th of a second, and my flash power is at 1/8 power. All of that stuff is easy. You all know how to set that in your camera, and it's all about just getting your light modifiers, back to your question earlier, choosing and setting up your light modifiers to get the look that you're after. I really could get that same look using a beauty dish. It would be ever so slightly different, just slightly. You know, the catch lights in the eye would be a little bit different, but the overall look and feel would be the same with a big with a big umbrella with a big reflector as the key light. So that's neat. And this is really what I was after. This is really the look I was after achieving today. Everything is kind of led up to this, where you've got basically 3 panels, side, side, bottom, and then the key light up on top. So the last setting that I want to do here is softbox behind the subject. I'm going to use the same light stand here, pull these apart. I'm going to drop off this softbox, and we'll go to the big honkin' one. And for this one, I'm actually going to have you end up standing. So I know I said this earlier, normally I don't like the models to move equipment around a set, but if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could pull the stool off to the side. That would save us a minute or two. Cool. So the purpose of this look is to make a absolutely pure white backdrop, okay? All the light's going to be shining from behind her. So for her to be illuminated properly, we're going to have to reflect a lot in front of her. And you see what's happening? That's pretty common with heavier lighting equipment. Make sure that your grip equipment is sturdy and metallic. This is made out of metal, but it still kind of falls forward. You have to really clamp it down. Okay. You're going to end up standing right in front of it. So go ahead and stand in front of it, and then I'm going to position the height properly here. I clamped that down so hard. There we go. And now I'm going to raise it up about there. All right, how does that look, team? High enough? Cool. Yeah. Okay, move that way a tiny bit. That was too much of a tiny bit. There we go. Back. Yep. And now I got to throw a flash in there. And I'm going to build this shot. So I'm going to shoot it first with no reflectors, so you all can see what that's going to look like. And then we'll throw in a reflector or two up front. And because so much light's going to be coming from the backside, I'm probably going to have to be using metallic reflectors rather than white reflectors. Okay, flash goes back there, and I'm currently at an 1/8 power. And there, we've got a nice metallic reflector on that stand. So I'll just pull this one over. Rotate that around. Excellent. There we go. So we'll start, oh yeah, I was going to take one without it, and then I was going to bring it in. So this first one is just to judge the background exposure. And what I'm doing here is a great skill set for you to learn, and that is build your set, build your lighting step by step by step, so that you understand what each one is contributing to the overall scene. So that looks good. Great. This first image will be just the background light. And so now what I'm judging is whether or not that background light is bright enough. And I don't quite think it is. I think I need a little bit more oomph coming off of that background. So I'm going to increase my ISO up to, let's go up to 320. I was at 200, now I'm just increasing my ISO. Yeah, I like that. Nice job. I think that'll probably do it for the brightness of the background. Okay, do you notice what happened? This is important. Do you see it went from fairly crisp to somewhat ethereal? There's a little bit of a haze, and that's what happens when you go from the correct brightness to a slightly too bright. There's this fine tuning. We can get rid of some of that haziness inside of Lightroom. What I'm talking about is haziness on her face compared to this one, which is her hair is nice and crisp and all the lines are well defined. So the lighting that I want is probably somewhere in between those two. So rather than ISO 320, I probably would go down one stop. But just for the sake of time, I'm going to live with it. And now I'm going to pull in the reflector. So I'll pull in one reflector like that. Okay, move that way literally 1 inch. Yep, perfect. Hey, that was good. All right, here we go. Super. So now we can see how much light that one single reflector brought in. That was a silver reflector. Cool. Not quite enough. And so to solve that problem, I'm going to have you actually back up a little bit, kind of back almost to the, yeah, right there. I'm going to bring this even closer. That's one of the things you're probably all picking up on is how close all this stuff has to be to get the looks that we're after. Nice. And again. Cool. And while that's loading, I'm going to pull over one other reflector. And you want to be my reflector holder again? I know. You're getting a little comfortable there. Okay, right like that. And
gonna stand.
yeah, right close to you. You and I are buds.
The other way.
Okay. Bring it in a little closer. Right there. Nice. And I'm just shooting right through this little gap here. And the other side of this reflector is white. I should probably go with silver, but we'll go with white. Cool. All right, back out just a tiny bit. Great look. Okay, thank you. All right, you can grab a seat you can grab a seat over there if you want. Cool. That actually turned out pretty good. So what are the good parts of it? What are the bad parts? Well, the good parts, it's kind of got even lighting. We've got a little more sculpting here. See that? That's from the silver reflector. This side over here is the white reflector. So if I really wanted it much brighter over here, I go back to silver. The background is really white, which I like, but it's not quite bright enough on her face. And so to do that, you just really need more silver. Kind of like that old skit, more cowbell. We need more silver. Sorry, that's a joke that only I get. Let's talk about Lightroom, because this is where it all comes together. We've spent the morning going through the different lighting styles. We've talked about tech, and we've talked about ISOs and gear and all of that good stuff. But we've only been using one flash, a single flash. And to be honest, every time I do this, I'm always amazed at what you can do with a single flash. We've got some really nice photos in here, but we need to take it to the next level because these are beauty shots. And to do that, we need to do some skin work, and we also need to do some background work and overall contrast and color. So let's do that next. So let's real quick, we'll go in here and we'll look at the images and we'll pick a few. And I know we've shot a lot of stuff today, so I might have a hard time remembering exactly what each image was shot at. But the point right now is to go in and find a few images to actually edit. And what I do, I use color labels. So I use the label 6 to indicate select. And then I use the number 8 to indicate approved for the client. So when I'm done doing the editing, I'll actually, pick a bunch of them that I actually like, and I'll color those green or the number 8. So let's start with one here, 6, and let's pick that one there, 6, and let's pick, I'll probably just pick 4 or 5 to go through. One that's going to need a little bit more work with the background, that one will. And let's pick one with one of those hard shadows on the edge, just to talk about how difficult it is to work on those in Lightroom when you mess up in the real world. And then finally, let's pick that one. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter with the little filter tool down here, and we'll just look at just the red ones, or just the ones that I've picked. So there's one there, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so this is one of the first ones that we shot with today. And remember, one of the difficulties of this was we were only using the softbox. I think this was our softbox one. In fact, if we look at her eyes, and this is one of the things that I encourage all of you to do, is to break photos down by looking at them inside of Lightroom to understand what the other photographer's lighting style was. You can see with her catch light what my lighting scenario was. If you're a smart photographer, you know exactly how this photo was taken, a single softbox. And then you can look at the lighting on the background and go, oh yeah, and he didn't use another flash, nor did he use a reflector. So if we want to fix this photo to make it look like a true beauty shot, you've got a lot of work to do. To try and brighten up this backdrop, to make it white as it normally would look, you've got a ton of work to do, and you can't really do that in Lightroom. You got to go out to Photoshop, you got to mask her out, and do a lot of background work. So I'm not going to do any real significant work on this one because it's going to take way too much effort. This one, on the other hand, I think would work. Yeah, let's go with that one. I like that one a little better. Okay. So here we go. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to crop out that V flat over there. So the crop tool is the letter R inside of Lightroom. I don't know why they call it R for maybe crop. That works, crop. Okay, so I'm just going to crop that out just to get rid of the background. And then I'll crop it so that we don't show any of her top. And we'll go right about there. Okay, excellent. One of the things back in the presentation materials, I've got kind of laid out my overall process. And how I think of when I work on these photos is I start globally, and then I go regionally, and then I go to pixel level fixes. So globally, what needs to change globally? Overall color, that's white balance, and maybe overall contrast. Now I set my white balance to flash, which is great, but I have something in this photo that is actually pure white. So what I'll do is a lot of times is I'll grab my white balance tool, that's right here, it's in the upper right corner, that little eyedropper, and I'll just go back onto the scene and click that, and now it's actually pure white. I know it's pure white, the white balance has got the right color cast, everything's cool and copacetic. I'm happy with that. Next, what global changes do I need to make to exposure? Now I'm shooting with the RAW file, so that means I have a lot of dynamic range. So I can actually kind of overexpose the photo, knowing that I can push back detail on her face using a brush tool or using some other tools. So that's what I often do is I start with an image that's slightly too bright so that I kind of get that white background to be pure white. What other global settings? Some people like to work with contrast, and I will say this, contrast is a very dangerous tool to use. Look what happens when I bring contrast up. You see the colors change quite significantly, and it actually produces a lot of unwanted shadows. So I generally don't like to do contrast. If I want more contrast, I like to use clarity. Clarity actually is a better tool for adding kind of localized contrast. But again, back to our original purpose. Our purpose here is beauty shots, right? And we don't want all the detailed shadows in the face. So I would generally say don't do a lot of clarity here. Same thing with vibrance. The only time I would add vibrance is if she had, like, say, like really bright lipstick, or if we were purposely trying to create some specialized fashion-y look. So I'm not going to even add a lot of vibrance here. We're going to keep all of that pretty neutral. That's pretty much for my global adjustments on this photo. So I just added exposure just a little bit, and then added a little bit of vibrance to get a little bit of that skin color back. One little tip that I have for you, you might consider doing, is going here. It's called your HSL, your hue, saturation, and lightness. You can then go into hue and then choose, let's say, like the yellow and oranges, and you can, I know this is like way over the top, but you see, like when I take the orange hue slider and I move it to the left, you see how I add some red color to her skin? So I do that sometimes if the person is exceedingly pale. All right, just a little bit, like -2, -1, somewhere in that range. We'll just for the sake of discussion, we'll just go -3 here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing what I would call regional adjustments. Regional would be like regions of the photo that need to change in big surface areas. So in this case, it's all about the background. We want that background to be white. So to do that, I'm going to grab the brush tool. So there's the brush tool. And it looks like a long brush. You can also type the keyboard shortcut K for brush. K. All right. We need to adjust the brush size. And to do that, there's a variety of ways to adjust the brush size. My favorite way is to use the keyboard shortcuts, the bracket keys, the square bracket next to the letter P on your keyboard. So I go left bracket to make that brush smaller, right bracket to make that brush bigger. And before I start brushing, the next thing I want you to look at is the mask. So make sure you turn the auto mask on. And what this will do is it'll prevent the brush from spilling onto her skin or onto her clothing or her hair. So we'll turn that auto brush on. And now I need to think, what am I trying to do? Oh, well, I'm trying to brighten up that background. So I need to add some exposure. So I'm going to paint in extra exposure. And I'm just going to guess with how much I need. So I'm going to add a little exposure, and then I'm going to add a little bit on the whites as well, because I know all of these together will combine and conspire to brightening up that background. Now I start painting, and you can see as I start painting with my brush, that background is indeed getting nice and white. Sometimes it's hard to see what you're painting, so type the letter O, O for overlay, or right here, see where my mouse is? You can click on that, and it will show you what you've painted in the color red. O for overlay. So now I can actually see where I'm painting. The problem with painting while it's red is I don't get a feel for how bright it's getting. So then I'll just type O again. And another way to see that overlay is you can hover over that pen right there with your mouse. So if I just hover over that, you can see the overlay, and then it goes away. Okay, so now I'm painting down here. A lot of times I will zoom in, so I'm just going to go space bar. Space bar changes your cursor to a zoom tool. I click there, and now I can paint inside of her hair area just so that it looks kind of natural. Hit space bar again, and it zooms back out. So now that pen is active, and now I can really fine tune it. Sometimes it's good, a lot of times when I make these adjustments, my general approach is do big, wide adjustments and then kind of settle in on what you like overall. Yeah, right there. And then sometimes I'll set with that white slider just to fine tune it even further. Okay, we'll call that good. Now I hit done. If you click this button here, YY, that shows you the before and after views. So it's important to do that as you edit these photos, because what you might initially think is beautiful, You compare before and after, and you're like, whoops, that went over the top on that one. Not so hot. All right, so I click the YY button. Actually, I click back to this one, and it goes back to my single view. It's called the loop view, D for just develop. Now, I've done the regional, and now it's time to go into the face. And let's start looking at how we work on the face. Yeah, question. Go ahead and grab the microphone.
Thanks. Before you do something with the white balance, before you do that, with the little dropper,
Yeah.
what was that exactly, or what for?
Okay. She asked about the white balance tool. So it's over here. It's in this tool set called Basic. And inside of Basic, you'll see right there that this whole section here is the white balance adjustment section. So you can manually adjust white balance by saying flash, like let's just do that, click flash, very slight minor change, versus custom. Well, what's custom? That's the little dropper there. So I click that, and then I bring that out onto the scene, and then I find something that is truly white, or actually, I should say it this way, something that's truly neutral color. It could be white, it could be gray, it could be black. All of those are neutral color. You can click on any of those. So like if your background didn't have any white, but she had like jet black hair, you could actually click on that. Or if she had pure white teeth, maybe. So did that answer your question? Right on. Well, let's start talking now about her face. I'm going to zoom into her face, and we start looking very carefully. I'm going to get rid of this side panel just so we can see a little bit more. Now, the makeup artist did a really good job, and she has a nice complexion. So we don't have a lot of work to do on the face, but there's always some type of blemish or detail that we need to get rid of. My rule of thumb is this. If it's a temporary blemish, let's say like a zit or just something, maybe some mascara that fell into place on her face, we'll get rid of that. But if it's a permanent issue, let's say like Cindy Crawford has a mole on her face, and it's kind of her defining characteristic, well, it would be terrible to get rid of that because that's who Cindy Crawford is. So in this case, Natalie, we got to look and see, does she have something on her face that's defining? And it looks like she does. Underneath her nose, it looks like she has a little bit of a mole that's permanent. So we're just going to leave that there. Sorry, Natalie, I know you're watching, and I know we hate it when everyone's staring at every little pore in detail, but that's where we're at. So I start up the top, and I start thinking about getting rid of these little marks, and we do that with this tool right there. If I hover over it, you can see it's called the Spot Removal tool, and it's keyboard shortcut Q. And now what we're looking at is finding these places on the face that need to be repaired. We need to use the healing tool, not the cloning tool. We got to use the healing tool. You see that over here, heal. What heal does is like magically repairs the area. Cloning finds some other piece of skin next to it and physically clones pixels onto that. We don't necessarily want to clone, we want to heal. We can change brush size just like this, like we did before. So typically you want your brush to be slightly larger than the thing that you're fixing. So we'll click on that. And this is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to make my brush size smaller. So click there. Okay, I know you guys have all seen this before, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. Sometimes when you get down to the hair area, do you see what happened there? Do you see how I clicked on this spot to remove it and it picked something else next to it that was similar? And so it gave me some funky fix with a little dot in the middle. So sometimes we just have to delete it and try over again. And it looks like in this case, oh, there we go. So I'm moving the target, I'm sorry, I'm moving, the pull from place to a different area to fix that. Okay, and we'll look around here. Looks like there's a little mark there. I'm clicking and dragging. Click that, click this. I won't spend a whole lot more time on this. You guys get the idea. Okay, good, done. So now we've fixed the blemishes. Another thing that we always need to look for is neck and shoulders. So let's just go in there real quick and make sure there's nothing on the neck that we missed. Freckles, we got to keep the freckles. Some clients, when you photograph for a commercial client, they may say, we want no freckles. You know, that's important for us for some reason. Okay, well then you got to clone those freckles out. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to look at her skin. So how do we deal with her overall skin? Now she has pretty nice looking skin, but a lot of people don't. And so what we do is we brush in some blurriness over her skin. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, go back to the brush tool, and there's under the custom effects, you'll see that there's a skin softening preset. It's right down there. Soften skin. So what does soften skin do? Well, it changes clarity. It brings clarity way down, and then adds a tiny little bit of sharpness. And you're going to see when I do that, it's going to be too much. I'll do it here on her forehead. Watch. So I'm going to zoom back out, and I'll just hit done. And I'll just go before and then after. Yeah, it's hard to see here on the screen, I understand. So I'll redo and then edit redo. The point there you can see it. The point I'm making is when you do that preset, it makes her face look like a porcelain doll. It's just too much. It's over the top. So don't use the preset settings, rather adjust them to your own liking. So I'm going to go back to that, go back to my brush tool. I'm going to reactivate it by clicking on it. And now you know it's reactivated because there's a little dark dot in the middle and a white circle around it. So that one's active. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the clarity from -100. And I'm looking really closely here. Zoom in so y'all can see it. I'm just trying to get some softening, but still get some pores, some facial pores, some hair follicle type look. So a little bit of softening, there we go. It looks like -40-ish for the clarity. And now that that pen is still active, I am going to continue painting, paint over the nose, paint over the cheeks a little bit, cool, and over this cheek, excellent. And then sometimes a little bit on the chin as well. Okay, we'll call that good. Next are the eyes. So a lot of the window to the soul is always through the eyes, so we need to spend a little bit of time on the eyes. Some of the things I'm going to show you now are excellent thing to remember. If the only thing you remember today are for these beauty shots are the eye adjustments, then remember this. Back to the brush tool. One of my favorite brush tool presets is Iris Enhance. Iris Enhance. And then you can see I've made some other presets myself called Best Iris Adjustment and Better Iris Fix. I just keep trying to finagle this. But we'll just start with Iris Enhance as our starting point. What did it do? Okay, it increased exposure a little bit, it increased clarity a little bit, and it increased saturation a little bit. Works really well with people with blue eyes because then you start to see a lot of that deep blue come out. In this case, we got brown eyes. That's okay. I like it. So I'm reducing my brush size, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to paint right here in the iris. Paint right there around the brown portion. And then also with the same pen, I'm going to paint the other side like that. And I just want to show you, you can go over the top really quickly. You know, it can make her look really funky. So be very careful with this. Everybody knows what good eyes look like, and everybody knows what, I don't know, Star Trek eyes look like. So we'll do a little bit brighter on the exposure. And it needs to be subtle but significant. Does that make sense? Subtle but significant. Just a little bit on the eyes. You could also whiten the white portions of the eyes if you want to. Again, that's just another brush tool. Let me just show you that real quick. One more brush tool. And to do that, I'm going to zero everything out. So to zero out all of my sliders, I'm just going to double-click Effect. I want to add a tiny bit of exposure, maybe like 0.08, 0.07, something like that. And then I want to desaturate, so get rid of those red blood vessels, and then we just paint in there just a little tiny bit. Oops, I missed. It's hard doing this with the finger pad on your laptop, but that's okay. So we just do a little bit, not too much, not over the top. Again, look what happens if we go over the top. Okay, never looks good. So like 0.08, 0.1, somewhere in that range. And 0.06, good enough. Oh. And if you're using a laptop like I am, sometimes you just type in the number, 0.08. Type it. Okay, good, done. Now the last thing I want to show before we go to final questions and all that is sometimes we do like to do a little bit of sculpting on the face, just to get a little bit of shadow detail to kind of show those high cheekbones. And again, that's another brush tool. So in this case, I'm going to grab the brush and I'm going to zero everything out, and I'm going to go a little bit brighter in some cases and a little bit lower in some cases. So here I add some exposure, like 1/10 of a stop, and then I go find spaces on her face that are a little bit brighter, and then I brighten them even brighter than that. So like up here, the top of her cheek. I just do a little strip there, a little strip there. Maybe here's a bright area on the top of her nose. Actually, that brush is slightly large. Make it a little smaller. Here, top of that, over there, maybe down here. So I'm just adding a little bright to the already bright things. And then I go new for a new brush. And then I change the exposure and I drop that exposure down. Maybe like a minus 1/10. And now anywhere where it shadows, I just bring that in. And it looks like that was a little bit too much, but you get the idea. I can readjust that in a second. Maybe down here on the neck, kind of increase that shadow. Shoulders, clavicle, all that good stuff. Just to add a little bit of definition. And that minus 0.14 was a little bit too much, so I'm going to go to minus 0.1. 0.1, call that good. And now we hit done. And now it's time to look at the before and after. There we go. So the one on the left was straight out of camera. The one on the right is obviously the work that we've done. And you can see that it's important that you take your time in post-processing to get to that look, because it's hard to get that beauty look with a single flash. If you have multiple flashes, well, then you can make that background really as truly white as you want. But because I'm trying to show everything you can do with a single one, you got to pull out that white for the background by brushing it in. And then, of course, all the facial retouching and the skin, you got to do that as well, just to make it perfect. There you have it. There is our Lightroom extravaganza. So any questions on Lightroom?
Would you call that then client ready? Or would you do any sharpening or,
Yeah, good question. It's pretty close to client ready. I would actually do a few more things. And the reason why I didn't do it is because I know we're running out of time here. One of the things I would do is I would sharpen the lips. I would grab another brush and I would sharpen the lips, okay, because that always needs to happen. I would also sharpen the eyebrows. And then I would also do a super detailed look onto the face and make sure no stray hairs were coming over onto the face. If so, I would use my spot healing brush tool and just to get rid of those. After that, it's pretty close. Yeah, we're pretty close to going to the client. I always, anytime with a photo like this, depending on who the client is, that photo may be used in an advertising campaign. It may go on their wall, and they may print this thing like huge. If they do print it huge, then I need to inspect every inch of that at 100% zoom just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Because you know what's going to happen. Their mom's going to come over and look at that photo and go, wow, oh, what's that right there, honey? So yeah, look at it nice and close.